Hello, everyone. Let me just adjust my settings here. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. So good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Let me just change my settings here really quick so everybody can just come in. There we go. There we go. So thank you for joining us, everybody. I was just sharing with Allan that usually I'm the one that runs a little late for our sessions since I'm always in between classes or meetings. So today we're starting just about on time, and I wanted to welcome every one of you. And I also wanted to tell you how happy I am and excited I am that Allan Goldstein is with us today. Such an honor, such a privilege to have him. And one thing that I wanted to start with is that today the entire session is going to be recorded. I know often we don't record parts of the sessions that shows us, but this time you might come into the recording. I just want to make sure that you know that. And other than that, this will be, of course, for us to review and to see the class again, and anybody that can join us today. So yeah, I think, yeah, thanks for saying hello. If you like to say hello in the chat, if you like to tell us where you're from, so let Allan know where you're tuning in from, that will be great too, so he can get to know us as well. And I see some of you that I haven't seen in a long time. Hi. You know who you are, yes. Hi. So good to see you. So hi, Jill, and thank you for having your cameras on, some of you. I understand if some of you are at work, you might not be able to, but hello. And let me just go ahead and introduce Allan to you, and I'll pass it on to him. So again, it's just an honor to have him. He is being my mentor for about a decade now in my path to MBSR. And he has a really special place in my heart. Every time I teach, there's always teachings in which I remember and share his teachings with all of you as well. So let me just tell you a little bit of his professional experience. So Allan Goldstein has over 2 decades of experience in the field of mindfulness-based programs with a dedicated focus on MBSR teaching, mentorship, development, and support. He is the former managing director of the UC San Diego Center for Mindfulness and co-developer of the UC San Diego Center for Mindfulness Mindfulness-Based Professional Training Institute. Allan has also created a mindful teacher community network featuring weekly guest teachers, and it's called Views from the Field, and the sessions are recorded and shared, and some of you already know that because I shared my session when I attended. So and I will be sharing all the links for Allan's channel and website, so that you can at any point get in touch with him if you need mentorship or if you like to, you know, stay in contact. So I'm going to pass it on to Allan now. Let me just say, there we go.
Oh, wonderful. Great. Thank you, Alex, so much. And it's absolutely my pleasure to be here with this community. I was saying to Alex, it feels a little bit to me like that time at retreats when you come back from after dinner. And you have that session for about an hour and a half, 2 hours before going to sleep. I'm in Zadar, Croatia, and it's about 8:07 tonight, so it's wonderful. There's beautiful rain right now outside. So I'm going to invite us all to sit for a while as we settle and move into tonight's session on extraordinary somatic and sense of self experiences. We're going to move past all that credentialing that Alex mentioned. Thank you for that, but this is going to be a very personal exploration tonight. So I'm really looking forward to it. So if it's comfortable for you, adopting a dignified position in whatever way that accommodates the body to sit for the next period of time, and also if it's comfortable, the invitation is to close the eyes. And if not, allowing the gaze to soften and lowering it slightly downward. As we begin to slow down, to settle in to this seat, to this being here right now. As I hear the raindrops fall outside, I have a sense of stepping out of clock time, and the invitation to you is to allow all that it took to get here, all the preparation of the day so far, to drop away and arrive as fully and as awake in the senses as possible. This truly is it. Just this moment, this time that is beyond time. This being, this sitting here right now. In stillness. And a recognition of movement, of breath and breathing. Noticing the qualities of the breath, and perhaps bringing in the next in-breath to a degree of fullness that's comfortable. And in the out-breath, exhaling fully. Breathing and settling into the awareness of this being here, this moment. Checking in, perhaps even asking, how is this moment showing up? How is it being known? In the body. In the thoughts that may be moving at their own tempo. In any emotional tone that might be known. is this moment showing up? Seeing about meeting this moment now as much as possible by letting go of wanting anything to be different than the way it is right now. And right now. And now. Always now. Stepping out of clock time. Noticing this moment, and taking in the words of the poet Juan Ramon Jimenez, the poem I Am Not I. I am not I. I am this one walking beside me who I do not see, whom at times I manage to visit, and at other times I forget. The one who remains silent when I talk, the one who forgives sweet when I hate, the one who takes a walk when I am indoors, the one who will remain standing when I die. Allowing the words of the poet to sink in with the ability that great poets have to speak about the unspeakable. I am not I am this one walking beside me who I do not see, whom at times I manage to visit, and at other times I forget. The one who remains silent when I talk, the one who forgives sweet when I hate, the one who takes a walk when I am indoors, the one who will remain standing when I die. And as you're ready, letting this period of meditation continue in any way that is conducive for you as you accept an invitation of opening your eyes if they've been closed, and visually coming back to viewing everybody here gathered in this beautiful community of like-minded souls. So here we are, and we're going to take a bit of an exploratory journey into extraordinary somatic and sense of self experiences in a somewhat segmented way. And the first part will consist of exploring the mystery of perhaps the one who remains standing when I die, who we do not see. And the second part, a little bit of what might be referred to as what happens when the veil lifts. And the third part, taking a little bit of a look more concretely at what the research says we're challenged by in these extraordinary experiences through meditation practice. So beginning in the mystery, which is where I choose to usually land most of the time I can. This story goes back to when I was 19, or somewhere around that age, as an old hippie, a young hippie at the time. And I'll do my best to tell it in a pithy way, because to really set the scene and set it up requires most of the rest of our time together. But basically, I was on a beach in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, called Wellfleet Beach. And I was with 2 visitors to Boston, 3 actually, who I had met earlier in the week. And I had taken them to the beach in my van, and the van broke down. And we remained on that beach for 3 nights. After the first night, we had run out of money and were literally walking 3 miles down to not a McDonald's, but a fast food place that was like a McDonald's. And we were eating things like the onions and leftover condiments that were left outside. And then we'd walk back to the beach. Had glorious days, and it was fairly comfortable at night. Then on the 3rd night, it began to rain. And it began to rain not terribly hard, but hard enough so that by 3 in the morning, everything was wet. My sleeping bag was soaked. I was hungry, miserable, and couldn't get back to sleep. So I got up and I started walking down the beach. Now, if you know Cape Cod, it's kind of shaped like that. And Wellfleet is right at the bend of the elbow. And it just really is far out into the ocean as you can get. So the roaring ocean is to my right. I'm walking down the beach. And there's a national seashore there with a 40-foot sand dune that goes for 26 miles. And it's literally a large, very large sand dune. And nobody is there. It's the middle of the night. Nobody else is on the beach. It's dark, it's drizzly, it's damp and wet. And I remembered meeting somebody in Cambridge, Massachusetts, about 3 weeks or a month earlier, who taught me a chant, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. And in my practice and in MBSR and my work, we study Vipassana meditation, insight meditation. But at this point in my life, this was the first meditation I'd been introduced to. And I was told that if you chant this chant, you could wish for anything you would want and you would get it. So being hungry and miserable and having no money, I started chanting for a dime. Because if I had a dime, I could call my friend a few towns over on Cape Cod and he could come pick us up and get us off the beach. So I'm walking along chanting, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. And I don't know how long after, maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I'm walking right along the water's edge. And I take a step, I'm looking down, and right in front of my right foot, I see something. And I bend down, and I pick it up, and it's a dime. So this was quite an experience for me, quite an unbelievable experience that I should happen to run across a dime, not a penny, not a quarter. People lose change on the beach. It wasn't that crazy for me to think that it couldn't happen or could happen. But it led me to say, well, okay, that's great. If I had $1 when the restaurant next to where we were staying opened up, I could buy a hamburger when I made the phone call. And hamburgers at the time at this place were $1. Now, back when I was 19, there were some times when psychedelics had been a part of my life. And for many years after this story, I always look back on it up to this day to question whether this really happened, or was I tripping, or was there something involved? And from the next year till now, there's been a continuum of knowing that this happened. And this is something that I know deep in my soul. So I started walking and chanting for $1. And again, I'm walking for a period of time, I don't know, maybe another 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And it's starting to get light. It's still drizzly and misty. And a wave comes in. I see something on it. I walk a little quicker up to it so that I could get to it. And I put my foot on it, and it's $1 bill. Okay, I didn't just find $1 somewhere on the beach. For some reason, it was washing up on a wave. Well, this was extraordinary for me. And it came through a meditation practice of this chant and this organization that I wasn't fond of later on in life. And I was somewhat in shock. I fell down and I sat there for about 3 hours till it fully got light. And it dried up a bit when the sun came out, and I walked all the way back. I called my friend, I bought a hamburger, and we got off the beach. So for me, I don't know how it's landing for you, and I have to say that I never would tell this story until recently, and this is the first time I've ever mentioned it where it would be recorded. But hey, at this age, what do I got to lose? Think what you will. But for me, it was the most extraordinary event. So in sharing that mystery of my life, I'd like to invite you, and Alex is going to help us move into dyads. And the invitation is, if there's something that you're comfortable sharing along these lines with your dyad partner, it doesn't have to be so dramatically like $1 washed up on a wave. It could be very simple. And it might have happened at any age. It might have happened earlier today. So that's the invitation, and we'll take maybe 10 minutes, so you'll each have about 5 minutes to briefly share something, and feel free to pass if you're not comfortable, and if neither of you has anything to share, well, use the time to get to know each other. But that is the invitation and the suggestion. So with that, Alex, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful sharing, Allan, and for your trust in us to actually share that story with all of us. Yeah, and so as we all go into the breakout rooms, I just wanted to remind you that I might be still moving people around the rooms as not everybody goes into the room. Hopefully this time everybody will, but there might be some rooms with a person left, so you'll be coming across some rooms. So just make sure that you're aware of that. If you're new, if this is your first time in the group, do please introduce yourself, let people know who you are, and yeah, just have a good time sharing. So here we go. If you're new, there'll be a little window in the middle of your screen. You can just click on that and we'll bring you back in about 10 minutes, so you don't have to worry about anything else. And we'll see you soon. to see you.
Okay, looks like we're all arriving back together here. Great. Okay, well, I'd like to open it up if anybody would like to share an awe-inspiring, supernatural, spiritual, religious, extraordinary experience you might have had. We'd love to briefly hear it. Maybe we could get one or two. Ginny, and then Pam.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Goldstein. I've heard about you so often. I'm so happy to have the opportunity. An unusual experience happened to me yesterday, and it is so fresh. I had not planned to share it with anyone because it's so new and so fresh. I have Meniere's disease, and I have not been hearing people very well for several years. To hear people on the phone, often I have to put the phone up to my ear to hear it. If people are masked, I haven't been hearing them for quite a while, but I also have not been walking well because I had Meniere's. During this summit, I was listening to Chris Germer for the third time, and I knew what he was saying, so I put my phone down in one room. I walked to the other room and was making coffee, and I realized I was still hearing Chris Germer. So I thought, well, he has quite a microphone today. And I thought that's all it was, and I let go of it. And then I found I walked around and I could hear people. They were talking. So I did not understand how that could have happened. So I made an appointment with the chief of otology, at UCSF. I live near San Francisco. I was speaking with him yesterday. He looked at my audiogram. He talked to me about what had happened, and he said, "You no longer have Meniere's." He said, "It rarely happens. This is less than 1%. And I said, if you weren't the chief of otology, I would not believe you. I do not believe what you're telling me. And he said, "You need to believe it. I am the chief of otology." And I said, anybody else, I could not believe this. And I still don't know whether I can really believe what he said. So I wanted to share that with you in particular. I did not intend to share it with anybody online because they don't know. They haven't seen what it's like for me to walk around and be deaf and not be able to hear conversations and to interact and to not be able to walk with other people.
Oh, my. Oh, I'm so happy for you. Congratulations. That's such an unknown, mysterious, beautiful thing that has happened here. I have a question, if you don't mind.
Please do. I'm questioning everything.
That's a good place to land. If you could bring up one of the attitudinal foundations that we often talk about in MBSR, beginner's mind, trust, whatever it might be, non-judgment, non-striving.
How about all of the above?
Yeah, okay. That's a good place to be. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm very happy for you, Jenny.
And I will do that. I am returning to everything in MSC. I stay with a circle of practice.
Yes. Well, and if you're gonna hear voices, Chris's is a good one to hear.
Oh, it was perfect.
Okay.
Shame of all topics.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Pam?
Hi there. Thank you. And I was in the middle of telling Jill my story and she was listening and I accidentally pushed the out button. So I'm going to tell everyone the story. So some years ago, after my grandmother had passed away, I went to a very small village in Greece where my grandmother was born, and she always wanted to go back to. And it's a village called Kastraki, and it's right in a place called Meteora, which is many people believe is sacred. It's where the giant sandstone rocks and cliffs from the earth, and the ascetics used to come and meditate and practice there. And then eventually the Greek Orthodox Church kicked them all out lovingly and built monasteries on top of these cliffs. So very, very wonderful place. And I had never been. I had just heard about it my whole life. And so we went, my husband and I went and went to the village, and we were hoping to find the home where my grandmother was born. And we got there, and they said that really all the paperwork had been destroyed when the Nazis had come through. They had burnt the town, and they burnt a lot of the city resources. And so we decided to just walk through the old part of the village. And we were there in the afternoon, and a woman came out, and she was a yaya or a grandmother. And she looked at me and asked me what I was doing there. And I don't speak Greek very well, but I told her that I was there to find my grandmother's house. And she just looked at me, and she cupped my face in her hands, and she kissed me. And my heart just leapt out of my body. I felt like my grandmother had reached down and grabbed my face and just kissed me. It was the most beautiful thing in the world. It just leapt out of my chest. So the next day, we found some cousins, and they were able to show us where my grandmother's house was. And it was literally right across the street from where that lovely lady. It's like we were standing in the middle of the street. Her house was to the right. The house that my grandmother was born in, was to the left. And it was just one of those very, very profound life reaching in experiences. So yeah, it was very, very, very beautiful and very trusting. And I guess with the foundational pieces, what comes up is trust that the universe is loving, that the universe is large, and all of this is contained. So it was a beautiful experience. And Jill, thank you for waiting to hear the rest of the story. So yeah, it was lovely. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Pam. What a beautiful reconnection with your grandmother.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, let's take one more. I see Claudia.
Hello. Yes, I had similar experiences to you, Allan. Same time frame of, completely extraordinary travel and psychedelic experiences, but somehow those and then other. I mean, it seems like I've had an incredible amount of extraordinary experiences between. I'm a nurse practitioner, so I work with people, and their lives just are like so changed after they've had actually had visits and understood their bodies, and just very simple things that I'm doing. But, it is all really quite extraordinary. But what I really feel is the most amazing is the ordinary within the extraordinary. So like today, I mean, finally it's springtime in Iowa, and I take a walk pretty much every day in the woods and the prairie, and it is so amazing just to see the new green grass coming up, and the buds are finally, coming out on the trees. And so there's all this beautiful new green, and the birds are just spectacular outside my window on the feeders. Like, oh my God, it's a bloom, indigo bunting. I mean, this morning, I just was so excited about, the colors of the birds. And so it's like the ordinary is so extraordinary. And, so yeah, it's really to remember that, I feel like, is really important to me.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. That really helps to kind of bring both sides together. And I'm not so sure my next story relates to that so much. But here we are looking at the extraordinary and the mystery, which I kind of think of the quote very often that I have written down here by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And the next story that is also personal that happened to me, and we won't go back into breakout rooms after this. We'll just stay in our large group. I was at Mount Madonna Retreat Center for John Kabat-Zinn and Saki Santorelli's training, which was the initial training on the path to the trainings that UMass had for, and this was for healthcare professionals. There were about 160 people at this training in 2001. And we'd gone through it, and it basically was a recreation of the 8-week MBSR class over that period of time with a lot of other things, insights that John and Saki had about teaching. And we got into the point where we were in our silent all-day session, which was going on all day. And it was lunchtime, and I was outside. I don't know if you've been to Mount Madonna, but it's a beautiful retreat center, and it overlooks Monterey Bay. And I went outside and sat on a bench overlooking the bay after being there for probably 5 days at that point in silence. And all of a sudden, the whole landscape merged into what I can only describe as energy. The bay disappeared from my view. The bench disappeared. I disappeared. And all I could visually and just embody awareness. I was just not there in a lot of ways. But I was somewhere, and it was very beautiful. And at that moment, I thought I had achieved something in meditation. I kind of thought, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is, what we're looking towards or moving towards. I don't want to use the word enlightenment. I didn't think that, but I thought something had been achieved. And as soon as I recognized it, that like thinking came in, it all started to go away, and I started to come back, and the bay came back, and the bench, and me. And it didn't last long. It might have been 30 seconds, the whole experience, but I thought I'd really gotten somewhere. And I couldn't tell anybody because we were silent. That night, John and Saki had a book signing for both their books, and everybody lined up to get in line. And I ended up in Saki's line. And I thought, well, when I get up and he signs Heal Thyself, his book, I get a chance to tell him. So I finally made it up to the front of the line. I sat down. I said, Saki, you wouldn't believe what happened to me today. And I recounted the whole story to him in more detail. And he looked at me and he said something that really shocked me. He said, don't worry, Allan. The old Allan will come back. That is not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear, oh, that's it. You really attained something. That's what it's about. He said, don't worry, Allan. The old Allan will come back. And I just felt the disappointment surge through me. And he said, the veil lifted for a few moments, and it drops back down. So again, an extraordinary experience through a prolonged period of meditation practice where the veil lifted. I don't know if this can be related to the dollar and the dime, if the veil lifted. To me, there's something more mysterious about materialization of something that you're actually chanting for, and you get exactly that. So that's another story that I want to share around extraordinary experiences. And this was very somatic in all ways, where I disappeared, I came back, and that feeling that I got when Saki said, "Don't worry, Allan." It was totally a felt somatic experience within all of that. In some ways, I am going to refer to the poem by Emily Dickinson, "Me from Myself." And both these poems are old school MBSR poems in the sense that John used to read these. This, from my experience being in a room with him. And they're kind of like couplets in a way. I am not I, and me from myself. So Emily Dickinson writes, "Me from myself to banish had I art. Impregnable my fortress unto all heart. But since myself assault me, how have I peace except by subjugating consciousness, controlling consciousness? But since myself assault me, how have I peace except by subjugating consciousness? And since we're mutual monarch, how this be except by abdication, me of me?" Nobody writes quite like Emily Dickinson, you know. So me from myself to banish, had I art. You know, if I had the art to do that, in some way that happened when the veil lifted. But usually, you know, we've got walls. Impregnable my fortress unto all heart. We're not going to let that readily occur. And because of that, since myself assault me, how have I peace except by subjugating consciousness? And since we're mutual monarch, we both kind of rule the show here, how this be except by abdication, the two sides, me of me. Maybe another way of looking at no self, or getting past the story of I or the story of me. And in those moments when it's achieved, if it's achieved in certain ways, the veil lifts, possibly. So the mystery and then the lifting of the veil happening through meditation practice as extraordinary experiences. So can anybody relate to that, particularly the lifting of the veil piece where we kind of dissolve? And if you can relate to it, was it scary? Was it like I first took it as, oh, I got someplace, an achievement? What was it like for you?
Allan, thank you very much. I actually raised my hand before you asked this question.
Okay, wonderful. I'm sorry I didn't see it. We have 3 screens and I'm not catching everybody.
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you very much. Um, Beautiful, wonderful sharings. Thank you so much. So soul nurturing, I will call them. I am not a native English speaker. I want to ask you, when we get visited by those dark nights of the soul, and sometimes we lose the faith of there is a process and trust of this process, like this too shall pass, and we're just in the mud and wishing, praying, like when you said praying, and the prayers are not asked, and we're here now waiting, thinking that I believe in miracles, and not just miracles like big miracles, just small miracles, like a call from a friend, a hug from someone who's close to me. So we had this dark night of the soul, which lasted now for 2 months. I am getting better thanks to my friends here, my sangha, and but I wanted to ask you how to hold. It's not how to hold on to life. I hope my English is getting it right, but it's we feel the sense of I is so tangible when we are in that dark night of the soul. I cannot say I am not this second. So, what is the instruction? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a very heartfelt question. Yeah. I don't have the instruction. I don't know. I don't know. What have you found benefit in? You mentioned the Sangha.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is that enough?
When I had that very dark period, I separated myself even from our Sangha. I found refuge in walking meditation of Thai, sometimes like picturing myself holding Thai's hand. And then sometimes it looks like it's all a lie. So it's I had to go seek therapy, and I know that the little things helped because now I'm feeling better. But I'm so afraid that I will get visited another time by another dark night of the soul. So looking for something. Yeah, I think you got me. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned another leg of this stool, which is practice. And it sounds like you're moving through it in the way these dark nights resolve, which is we do come out of it, but then that fear of going back in can be anticipatory fear in itself that can be debilitating.
Yeah.
So what brings trust that, you might be able to let go of that, and something to sit with, because I don't have the instructions. There's no manual.
Yeah.
No, that I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm just so happy though that you're past the darkest.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, you're welcome. Mike?
I think Marcy Marcy might have been first, but that's right. We'll get to her next.
Yeah, sure. I'll be really, really, really brief. I just wanted to say, Allan, thank you so much for the practice today and for reminding me of something that I had forgotten about. Back 30, 40 years ago, I used to say that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. I remember hearing it. I remember saying it. I remember believing it. And, until you said that today, I had perceived that my spiritual beliefs have evolved much more recently than what they really did. And you reminded me of a core belief that I hold to today for decades, and I really appreciate that. It changes my perception of my history, and I'm very, very grateful. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Okay, we'll go to Marcy, and then I want to make sure I touch on, it's just going to be briefly because I'm not a researcher and studies aren't my thing. I'm more, again, back on the mystery side of the spectrum. But I do want to recognize Marcy, is it? And yeah, hi, Marcy. Okay. Hi.
Thank you. I'll be brief too. To go back to your initial question, I've occasionally, very occasionally, had experiences when I'm engaged in formal Vipassana practice, where I'm sitting and go into a period of open awareness, where I have a sense of flow out of me and flow into me. And it's almost like I lose the boundary between within myself and without myself. There's this porousness, and I feel a movement in both directions. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Beautiful. And can I ask how, when you feel that, what's your perception?
I don't tend to analyze it. I just am with it and experience it.
Yeah, great. So it is. It simply is.
Yeah.
Just is. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Well, so let me just check. Thank you all for still being here. So many of you might be familiar with Willoughby Britton and Jared Lindhall, who have done a lot of research on the adverse effects of meditation. And I like to think that it's more around particularly long meditation retreats in the traditional sense, more than you might be presenting and find in a mindfulness-based program that's 8 weeks as we know them. But they can happen at any time. And I just want to touch on what these have been defined as within this qualitative study that they did on meditation-related challenges, and see if any of these ring true. So one is a change in the narrative self. So this can be that challenge of letting go of the I that we think we are, and the story of who we are, who am I, might be one of the most profound questions we could ask. So that narrative self, it could also be a narrative story about anything, but particularly about the who am I part of the self. Loss of sense of ownership. Loss of sense of ownership, or loss of sense of agency, like agency of control. That can be quite frightening when that happens. Change in a sense of embodiment. Change in self, other, or self-world boundaries. That boundary between us and them, and we're all one. There is no us and them, which, for me is a place I'd like to dwell, as hard as it is. But for somebody who's new to meditation, or somebody in a certain state of meditation or practice, that can be challenging. And loss of sense of the basic self. So again, it's not maybe just the narrative self, maybe it's a broader loss of sense of self. Like maybe what happened to me on the bench, I'm not here. But as soon as I thought I wasn't there, I came right back. Because I was there, somebody thought it. So in its most basic form, like especially around sense of embodiment, perhaps you've experienced some times where after long, prolonged periods of practice, you might have found like a release in some way of a somatic release of tension. Or I remember once for me in some trainings that I would go to bed at night and my body would just start shaking from whatever was being released through the intensity of the meditation practice and all this sitting. So I'm curious if anybody's had any of those kinds of experiences. Marcy, I see your hand, but is that up again? Yeah, okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
I'm not sure if this qualifies, but I have occasionally had experiences during meditation where, without my going into a sort of an involuntary rhythmic movement, not so much a shaking, but it's more like a rocking movement. It seems to originate in my pelvis, and the rest of me gets carried with it. And yes, it freaked me out the first time it happened, the first few times. And I asked teachers or mentors about it, and I just got funny looks. And that was it. And it occasionally continues to happen, and I've just come to accept it, that this is an experience that sometimes happens when I meditate.
Yeah. Well, you found acceptance around it, so there's no aversion to it or wanting to have it happen again, grasping to find that. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it's definitely part of what can happen, and to whatever degree we can be curious about it might provide some insight, but ultimately landing on acceptance. Yeah, thank you. I saw another hand a little bit as I scroll through the names in chat. Was it Alexander? Alexander. I'm not sure if you... Okay, Martha. Yeah, still muted.
No, I was just seeing Ginny's hand up, and I wanted to point to that if I interpret your hand correctly, Ginny. Did you raise your hand again?
Yes, I did.
Thank you, Martha. Hi, Ginny.
this is one I hadn't even told anybody about, but this is happening today. In meditation, I have literally been sitting there meditating, and my eyes are closed, and I think I've walked into a wall. I really feel the physical presence of the wall, but I'm sitting in my meditation chair, and there's a whole room around me. There's no wall. And more recently, I actually felt it happening on top of my head, that it actually was that hammer was hitting on top of my head. And considering that I've had Meniere's disease, I just said that's part of what happens, and I'm not going to talk about it. Well, I still don't know what made that, why I got hit on my head and walk into a wall like that in meditation. Thank you.
Yeah. What's it like to be in the not knowing?
Not good at that.
Ah, it's a great practice. I think so much of meditation is being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And one of the most uncomfortable things for most of us, most of the time, is not knowing. So how do we find comfort in the not knowing? I think in my opening meditation, that line, which comes from Saki Santarelli, what would it be like to let go of wanting anything to be different than the way it is right now? Acceptance, not knowing, all that comes into play. So what's here now? That also always comes into play. That's really what it's about. What's here now? This is a little trick. If you're ever teaching and you're in a group and the group's very silent, just kind of look up that way. See if anybody starts to speak.
We got a question on the board, or hand raised for Mark. I'll unmute here.
Thank you. For Mark, hi. You're still muted. Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
I spent most of my life knowing. I'm really enjoying not knowing. I spent most of my life not being curious. I'm really enjoying being curious. Thank you, Allan.
Thank you. Thank yourself for finding enjoyment in those wonderful practices, letting go of having to know. It's kind of freeing, isn't it? Thanks, Mark. Well, Alex, that's all I've got. You know, what's here for you?
Thank you so much. You know, the theme of not knowing, I think it's here for me right now. They just, I feel sometimes like there is so much that I already know. It's kind of nice to not know a little bit, you know, the certainty of just being in touch with even the body, the sense of coolness and heat, and there's just so much I think that we realize, we don't even realize that we already know. And for me, it's just sometimes it's a little bit of a break. It brings curiosity to just not know as well in some ways, I guess. Yeah, just feels like a little bit of a treat in the sense. Yeah, but I understand that, you know, from time to time that can be also a tough place to be when things get difficult, you know, that the mind searches for certainty, and yeah, I'm caught in there too. So that's kind of where I'm at, kind of experiencing the flexibility between both things in some ways, I think. Yeah. But it's interesting how our humanness comes in. I really loved when you said, as Andrea said, "You'll be back." You'll be back, Allan. It's a great reminder, you know, that, yeah, we're still here. So, yeah, so I just wanted to close by saying thank you so much for such a wonderful time, such a wonderful class, and thank you, everybody, for your warm welcome and your participation, and just showing up for yourself in this way. It's not easy, and so thank you so much for that. And I thought maybe we can close our session together by just maybe just tuning into the breath for just a moment and just seeing what's here right now. Just noticing. And perhaps we can invite you to just navigate in the unknown and then bring in the certainty to what you already know as well. And at the same time, just letting it go, letting it be. What a wonderful time. We're so lucky to have you, Allan. And
Well, thank you, Alex. It's my
yeah,
pleasure. A beautiful group of people and souls and community that you've created here.
gosh, they've created it all for me on their own. I always say I just show up here and just, yeah, everybody's so wonderful. So thank you everybody. And yeah, we'll see you next Friday, and Allan will be in touch. Thank you. I appreciate it so much that you're here with us. Thank you for a wonderful class. So I'd love to hear from everyone. Do you like to say bye in any language that you like to say bye in? Gracias, adios. Bye, everyone. You can probably unmute your mics if you like to, yeah.
In Croatian, it's Bog. Bog. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
See you next